So hello and welcome everyone to this Let's Talk Light session from Thorn Lighting. This is the first of 4 sessions. So today we're going to talk about lighting the night and the best ways to do it. And then we have 3 more sessions. One looking at ecology, how we design to care. One looking at durability, so that's more product, how we design things to last. And then sustainability, designed to help. So hopefully you will be able to attend all of these. If you're interested at them, you can register on the Thorn website. And this, like I said, is the first one, and it's lighting the night and the best ways to do it. So my name is Peter Thorns. I'm the Head of Strategic Lighting Applications for Thorn Lighting. And I'm joined by Dan Oakley, who is a dark skies expert and environmental leader. So thank you for joining us, Dan.
Pleasure.
You're all muted. There won't be a question and answer session at the end, but if you have any questions, you'll see my email on the last slide. Please feel free to contact me. If I get any questions that I can't answer, I shall ask Dan because he knows more than I do. So, lighting in the dark sky. So the first question, Dan, is why do we light? So what do we actually do the lighting for?
Well, I mean, we can go back to when we were a very young species and we had a fear of the night, and a lot of the narratives we have in folklore all kind of like contextualize demons and bad kind of evil spirits with darkness. So humans have always felt a need to light their environment to make them feel safe, to kind of like shy away predators, and to make people feel safe. So lighting just gives us the ability to do that, and we carry that on as we do today, not with fires and things like that, but with modern street lights. And it is important because we do need to feel safe. And in this picture here, this is a picture that was just recently won an astrophotography competition with the South Downs National Park. And it's a great picture because it summarises all about dark skies for me. And you can see there that lots of people are lighting in very, very different ways. And people need to do that. People need to feel safe. The Sarah Everard case in London recently just highlighted that people need lighting to want to be able to walk the streets, feel comfortable, feel like they're going to get home safely, and other things like that. So as a dark sky manager, we recognise the need to be able to light things effectively, but also we also need to light things effectively so we can see the stars above us. And this picture really does sum it all up. I call it the battle of the photons, and you can see there we light the photons that are coming from the Milky Way above our head. They're the good ones, and what we don't necessarily want to see, and I would say that not all photons coming from lighting is bad, but some are, is the ones that are coming from the landscape below. And a lot of the dark skies management is being able to provide kind of like a trade-off between the light we need to feel safe and to do our work and to move around, and being able to see the night sky above us.
Thank you. So we need the light, but conversely, why do we need the dark? So why should we be so concerned about protecting the dark skies as well?
Well, I mean, I just talked about how, as humans, we need light to be able to feel safe, but equally, in the presence of darkness, we would see that little bit of light coming from the Milky Way. And whereas lighting these days kind of taps into security, the lighting coming from the Milky Way is a lot more connected to your soul and to us as a species, as people, really, how we connect with nature. And we've long had a long evolutionary history with the light that comes from the stars. It's all over our folklore and the way we grow up. But now I challenge anybody who's listening to this to go outside and look at the Milky Way and not look at it and not smile, because that's the first instinctive reaction you would do. So there's some kind of intrinsic link between this galactic view that we have up above our heads and ourselves, and it's important to protect. And as we kind of go, what a lot of the national parks try and do is we make sure we try and be able to see these objects by having these lighting schemes that enable us to see those kind of these wonderful objects in the night sky. So that's why we kind of need the darkness. I mean, I've done a dark skies talk many times. I've never met anybody who doesn't feel happy seeing more stars. And it's that kind of connection we want to make sure we protect. And some of the recent evidence we see from the CPRE in terms of their night blight data shows that we're slowly starting to lose our ability to see the night sky. And some people in cities don't even see it at all. So it is a habitat. I think of it as myself. It's a galactic habitat that we need to protect. And we all have a place to do it. So why do we need the dark? It just makes us feel good. It contextualizes our place in the universe, and that's why it really is important to protect it.
Thanks. I have to say I did grow up in Northumberland myself, and I could always just walk into the garden, look up and see all the stars. And a bit of me does wonder, if you can't see the stars, where will the next astronauts come from, for example? It gives you that ability to dream. So somehow we've got to balance the need for light and safety and the feeling of safety to the need for darkness and actually the ability to appreciate the wonder of nature. So how can we try to do this?
Yeah, okay, so there's many ways to do it, but just on your last point about will we get any more astronauts? I've always wondered if people like Galileo and Newton couldn't see a dark sky, where would we be in our journey with physics? Because if you couldn't see the Milky Way, you would have no idea of this universal structure that's out there. So maybe the laws of gravity might not be quite where they are as they are today if we couldn't have seen that dark sky. So Newton and Galileo would have great views, but they wouldn't have to do much. But we have to do a bit more with them these days. So there are lots of things to do. And in this picture here, this is the reason why I selected this picture. As you can see there's a very big rich tapestry of different light sources going on in different places. And as a dark skies manager, we have to be very careful about how we approach the way we go about trying to control this lighting, because you can see there's different sources, different colors, different uses. You can see the wind farm in the background there in the Solent, that's the Rampion wind farm. You've got Brighton to the left-hand side of Worthing to the right. So lots of different things. So what we try and do is try and understand how each light is put up and what guidance is, what regulations control its use. And as a dark sky manager, we kind of talk with other managers across the UK, and we try and figure out the best way to do this. And maybe this is by updating guidances. It may be looking at planning law, and maybe looking at enforcement. It may be just using the dark skies reserves and the dark sky places as a tool for engagement for the public. So there are lots and lots of different ways to do it. It's just kind of dependent on the light itself. And for the parks, a lot of it comes from the kind of like I'd say the public lighting, the street lighting. So it's very good to see that we're making a move to more efficient forms of lighting, although it's a bit higher in colour temperature, which is something we try and make sure is right. The move from the old sodium to the LEDs did have a marked effect on the quality of sky in the South Downs. So that's a good thing. We can, we're moving in the right direction with technology, but we've just got to back that up with awareness and other kind of policies and regulations.
Okay, so moving to LED technology from the old HID technology is allowing us to redesign and rethink how we do lighting, but we still have a lot of legacy lighting there. And even LED lighting doesn't mean you will get a good result unless you have a good design. So you can see in the picture there seems to be some of the lighting that's almost pointing straight at us. So it's not pointing at the ground, and it isn't pointing in keeping itself in its own area, but it's coming into this dark space. So what do we actually do about existing problem lighting that isn't due up for renewal yet? How can we do something to try and mitigate the effects of that?
Yeah, that's tricky. That's the nut we're always trying to crack as a national park. And it's at this point I do like to give a little bit of a hat tip to the local lighting authorities that have had regard for special qualities of dark skies, because they were the ones that kind of did all the retrofitting of the street lighting in our area that enabled us to go for a dark skies accreditation. So doing it at that level is really, really good. But there's all these different types of source of lighting you can see in this picture. And from my point of view, as a planning, working for a planning authority is what the national park essentially is. We deal with a lot of lights that are in planning and a lot that are out of planning. So things like domestic lighting and small businesses and anything kind of like permitted. So railways, airports and roads as well. So what can we do about that? Well, when I do my talk, I have a kind of like a standard Dark Skies talk I do. I try and get people to kind of think about lighting with a really kind of like silly little gesture that I do, where I kind of flatten my hand and I kind of raise it up and down a bit to signify that what we're trying to do is to get all lights pointing down. And I kind of make a joke in these presentations and I say, is there a lighting engineer in the room? No one ever says yes, unless it's a lighting one, because it makes me feel a little bit weird that I'm kind of like summarizing 20 years worth of scientific evidence and work into this one easy gesture. But it's basically it's that simple. And that's where we kind of like engage with our domestic audiences, is getting them to understand some fairly fundamental lighting design principles in a gesture that they can then go turn to their lights on their houses and go, oh, well, look, it's not pointing in the right direction, it's pointing upwards, it's pointing at my neighbour's fence. And all they can do, the very simplest thing they can do, is just make sure it's installed properly, make sure the light is going in the right direction, it's where they need it, it's when they need it, and they can move on from that. And if they feel like they want to change or upgrade their fitting next, they can do that. Alternatively, they can do the best thing we can do for a light in the dark skies, is to make sure it's off when we're not needed. And this is something that we try and do with our street lighting providers, is to try to look at some kind of dimming and trimming regimes, which all help. And we still know the need that people leave the lighting through the night. But there are easy ways that people can get started on this, even if it's just looking at their own lighting, and getting architects and developers to look at it at that kind of like design stage can do a lot as well, because if you can catch it then, it won't go through the planning process, and getting things fixed after the planning process is very, very difficult. So a lot of the work you'll see that dark sky managers and places do is to do that upfront kind of like awareness of just some really core fundamental basics of good lighting design. And it follows the principles that I'm sure everybody knows. It's the right light, the right place at the right time. And that's what we kind of follow in the way we engage with those kind of audiences.
That's great. So I actually spend quite a bit of my time working within standards organisations, helping write application standards. And application standards are a bit fragmented. So we have one for road lighting, we have one for sports lighting, we have one for outdoor workplaces. And this could be a bit of a problem. What do we do about the problem of lighting design practices we have it now? How can we sort of make it a bit more coherent and actually make it a bit more respectful of the dark?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem we have as a planning authority, is that because all these different lights you can see in this picture have different reasoning for it, they often rely on different kind of guidances. So what we've tried to do as a dark sky family is look at those guidances that perhaps are the core that underpin all these other kind of references. So for things like the street lighting policies a lot of councils have, they reference British standards. So, it makes sense to look at the British standards, and this is something we've been doing with you, Peter, and it's been great, is to look at the ways we can kind of get dark sky considerations put into those kind of standards, because if we can get them into those, then everybody has to use them. And they don't have to be very onerous, because a lot of the technical information is there. It's just a little bit of a tweak of the information to say, well, actually, look, if you are going to do this, consider it in a dark skies location. Think of other mitigations you could do. Make sure the colour temperatures is what we need for a dark sky place, which is 3000 Kelvin or even lower. And getting these into standards just helps planners and it helps the designers to understand what they've got to do it. And the technology is there to do it. And what I've found with all the planning applications that we have, and I should say that the South Downs is, I think, the 5th largest planning authority in the country. So we do this every day. It's the surprising few amount of cases where we get any kickback from this once we provide guidance in the language of a lighting engineer. I think that's the real key that success we've had, is using what's already out there, tweaking it in the language of a lighting designer, and then giving it back to them and being, saying, you need this spec, you need this kind of luminaire. And that really goes a long way. One of the other things we're trying to do as a Dark Skies family is work with the recently established all-party parliamentary group on dark skies and look at the ways we can actually improve the legislation with planning or with the Countryside Act or other things like that. And if we can get changes that in those legislations that are considerate to the guidances that already exist, then we could be a real kind of like, I'm going to use a terrible kind of phrase here, beacon of light for everybody else to follow, because we would have enabled the laws to change, the guidances to change, and just the awareness to kind of percolate down into the public level. And that's something I find really exciting. It's the policy changes that get me excited, because that's the only way we're going to get any changes in this country.
And one of the big problems that we seem to have is there's an expectation that spaces are lit. So people want the lights on. So if you look at some of the press, be it the national press or the trade press, there's lots of times where local councils have tried to turn the lights off or tried to dim the lights at different parts of the night. And there's been a sort of angry response from the people that live there, who even one actually did a crowdfunding exercise and said, we will pay for our lighting just to keep it on. So how do we educate people that there are times when actually the light isn't needed there, or that much light isn't needed there, or even in their gardens, we have very cheap solar powered garden lighting. How do we educate people on what is a good idea and what is good design and what actually is probably not such a good idea, and get out of the habit of wanting light all the time?
Yeah, it's that's an interesting. That's something a lot of people, when they come to our dark sky parties, where we have telescopes out, kind of talk about. They always moan about their neighbours' lighting, and yeah, we understand that there is maybe it's rational or it's irrational, but people need lighting. And even in the South Downs, when they looked at doing some street lighting changes, they did a pilot survey in the middle of an urban settlement, and unsurprisingly, that no one wanted to lose their light because they thought that crime would go up, even though evidence is showing there's no real kind of like link between the two. But in the South Downs and the rural places, it was the opposite. People wanted to remove their lights. So a lot of it does, I think, depend on where that person is and the education you have for it. And unfortunately, in these urban places, you just don't get access to the dark sky. So this is where we come in as dark sky places, is we try and work with those communities. We don't look inwardly, we look outwardly, because that's where the problem is, and make sure we do a lot of engagement and a lot of consultation with people in cities. And from my point of view, I mean, you can see from this picture the clear determinant of sky quality is street lighting, and its development, it's industrial kind of scale. It's not tremendously the garden size. It's not really domestic. So when I do my talk, I don't really badge on about people having to turn their lights off in their gardens. I mean, I live in Portsmouth, so I've got lights in my garden. And I don't want to be kind of like that draconian about it. But what we can do, we can educate those people to say, yes, you can have those lights, put them up, but make sure you just consider your neighbours rather than the dark skies. Consider how your neighbours might feel about it, and go from there. And one of the best things we can do is actually show them a dark sky. So we run a series of events. All national parks tend to do this these days. You get out onto your landscapes, you get out and you look at the stars, you get that smile on your face, you get that wonderful vista that you can't explain why it's so good. And then you get to look through a telescope and you see the rings of Saturn, or you see a nebula, and it all just clicks into place, and you understand that all what we're trying to do is perhaps the simplest move. It's angling the back of your security light that lights your shed from 20 degrees to flat, and you've done a huge amount you can do for dark skies. So it's a tough battle in the UK. We have our very poor legislation at the top. We have great guidances in the middle that we're working with, and we've got massive gaps at the domestic level. But we are a consistent family. We are on the move. We're happy to work with anybody and consult with anybody in the way we do this, but we really want to make sure that kind of dark skies and light pollution is kind of like seen as a social taboo in years to come, whereas littering and wastewater, no one really does that anymore, because people just know not to do that. Maybe we'll get to the same point with lighting, where we could just know when we go into the retail shops not to buy that kind of lighting, because we know it's bad for dark skies. So that's the aim, and it's great working with professionals like yourself to do that, because it needs it. You can't be just national parks and environmentalists nagging everybody else to do it. It's got to make everybody empowered to do their bit for it.
Wonderful. So thanks very much for all that, Dan. That
Pleasure.
finishes our questions. So Just to emphasize, this was the first of 4 talks. So we're looking at sustainability, environment, ecology, all of these issues, because they're all really important. At some point, we will run out of planet, and we'd rather we didn't. So these are all coming up. You can see Wednesday, the 21st of April, 28th of April, and 5th of May. If you want to register for these, you can via the Thorn website. If you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. My email is peter.thorns@zumtobelgroup.com. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening. And with a bit of luck, if we all do our bit, we can actually make it so that we can have much more dark skies. Thank you.